What's up, everyone? Welcome into the All 22 NFL podcast, the official podcast of the All 22 fantasy football platform. It is the only fantasy football game with full 53-man rosters, including offensive linemen, where you get to choose personnel packages and have access to PFF grading and advanced stats to make decisions each week. To learn more and sign up, go to all-22.com. Ray, dude, it's been 2 weeks since we've done this. I was going to ask you, since it's been 2 weeks, should we have had some maybe like sound bites, like you could just like throw electricity in when I'm talking, really get the juices flowing right now?
Is that my thing? Is that my under
Sound
my
guy,
role, my purview?
sound guy, video guy, layout guy.
I feel like of the three of us, there's only two here on this episode that I have like the worst podcast voice, so I should like not be the sound guy. Like anything auditory. It's a word. Look it up. For me, it's just not. It's not really my thing.
No, I like the idea you had, right? We were watching we were watching the draft together, and they were showing highlights of the players getting drafted, and they have such cool sound effects. And we said that Ray is gonna memorize the sounds like pshoo, pshoo, yeah, like exactly,
Yeah.
so that we can do that like auditorily over the videos. I think Ray, you are going to be the voice of the sound bites.
I will try to record myself with like Chat GPT or something. I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if that's like, what are they on GPT-4 still? I don't know. Yeah, we could maybe we'll do that. So
you need to get a hold of like Kanye West's 808 and Heartbreaks setup so you could do like auto tune, right?
Little T-Pain action. Yeah.
Yes. All right,
Yeah.
dude. It's been we talked about it, you and I, just privately, how it's been kind of like the NFL's script has run a little dry. And it's so dry that they are making the schedule release into this insane event where all the teams are coming up with these really funny social media contents. We were laughing about our friend Paul, who RIP used to be with PFF, but he has gone on to greener pastures, how he would love like the Skyline chili dogs from Cincinnati, right? And one of the teams released something about like if an NFL team was a Pop-Tart, who would they be? And they did Skyline chili Pop-Tarts. It was disgusting.
Would you eat that? Would you eat that?
No.
Why
well,
not?
if it's
no, not for like any sentimental thing. Like, would you eat that if it was there on the table in front of you, and like you were kind of hungry and you had like 45 minutes left till dinner? You wouldn't take a couple.
If you're
bites?
telling me that it's built the same as a normal Pop-Tart shell, absolutely not. That's disgusting.
Why does the build have anything to do with that?
Because the shell is sweet. Do you really want Skyline chili hot dog with sweet, sugary shell?
I don't know. I mean, we're going off track here, and like every podcast is someone's first, and they're like, "What the hell do these guys talk about?" Which is normally not this, but I'm not necessarily sure this is one of those pizza and ice cream mix type deals. Like that might be good. Like you have Skyline chili, it's got a little bit of the zest. Maybe if you add a little sweet to it, I don't know. I would try it. I would absolutely try it.
You're disgusting.
But it has to be real cheese, like real cheese that you would put in the Skyline chili, and then it's just in the form of a Pop-Tart, not like any like processed like fake cheese in a box. Like no, an actual Skyline chili molded into a Pop-Tart. I would absolutely try that.
See, the shell matters because if you told me it was like empanada shell just in the form of a Pop-Tart, that sounds amazing. I would love that. But a sweet Pop-Tart shell? No.
But then it's an empanada and not a Pop-Tart. That's the whole purpose of this.
Like a Pop-Tart, it's a Pop-Tart.
I don't think it's that's about shape, because what's the difference between that and like a kind of flat burrito?
Anyway, welcome into the All 22 podcast, everyone. Yeah, so schedule releases are a thing that happened. We're not going to talk about that because it doesn't have to do with fantasy football all that much, I would say. But today we're going to do something really interesting. And if it is your first time kind of in the world of All 22, we are a fantasy football platform that does things super different, right? We use PFF grading as a part of our scoring formula so that we can accurately score all 22 positions on a football field, right? Including offensive linemen. You heard it in the preview. But all 22 positions don't have the same impact, right? So we can measure the success based on PFF score, but you can't really measure an impact with PFF score. That's why we have all 22 weights, which is part of our formula that we do in our scoring, which essentially just says PFF grade times weight is the score that you get for that position in that week, right? the weights change. And this is one of the coolest things about all 22 is as the NFL changes, we change with it. So the way that we create our weights is with NFL salaries. So if the NFL decides that the quarterback position is more valuable year over year, that position's weight is going to change in line with how that position's paid. The NFL determines how these positions are worth by how they pay the players at that position. So we're not going to reinvent the wheel and try to figure out a new equation ourselves for the weight. We just depend on the NFL to know, besides the Browns, right? Maybe we exclude the Browns in the future from our formula. Any Browns player gets excluded. But most
I
NFL
don't think that's
teams
in the algorithm, but sure. Yeah.
but most NFL teams know how to pay the positions that matter, right? So we think that that accurately tells us how they view at least the weight, the importance of a position's impact on the results of a game. So saying that, right? This is year, I think 4 or 5 that we've done this, right? It's been quite a little while that we've had to enjoy this, but for the public, this is going to be the 3rd year that we're live to the public. So what we've kind of done today is created a chart that shows like year over year trends, things like that. But first, let's just talk high level about some of the changes that were made, because it is, again, it's super cool. When we started this, quarterbacks were worth 9.76% of your total grade. So it's out of 100, they're almost 10%, right? Or they were almost 10%. They are now above 10%. And last year they eclipsed that mark. This year they're almost at 11%. They're at 10.9. But Ray, maybe, since you're the math guru behind this, tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, so that's essentially it, right? The NFL tells you what they value by how they pay the best players at each position. So 20 years ago, I actually made this example, I think, earlier in the off season, right? Then we're in the depths of the off season now. Mm-hmm. 20 years ago, Clinton Portis was traded for Champ Bailey and a 2nd round pick. Okay. So that's how much running backs were valued 20 years ago. Today, that will absolutely never happen. That's it. Patrick Surtain is not going to be traded for Saquon and a 2nd. That's just never going to happen. So the way the NFL has valued these positions has evolved. And with our positional weights being updated each year, as the game evolves and as the NFL values each position differently, we evolve with the NFL. So 20 years from now, if running backs matter again, quote unquote, so to speak, not to just beat the drum on the whole running back deal, but if running backs become worth more monetarily in the future, if NFL teams start paying those players more money and investing more in that position, their weight is going to go up in all 22 as well. And that's the great thing about the all 22 platform and game, is that it reflects the present day value of NFL players. So in our startup drafts, your first overall pick is probably going to be Pat Mahomes, Joe Burrow, maybe Josh Allen, but maybe CJ Stroud even, who knows, depending on how daring you are, right? But if the NFL threw every player into a pool and had a startup draft tomorrow, quarterbacks would fly off the board, not Christian McCaffrey or another running back as you're used to in fantasy, right? So this is reflective of the actual NFL, and the weights are the biggest component and reason as to why, because they accurately depict the value of these players instead of just their statistical accumulation for yards and touchdowns for standard fantasy football. So with that, that's where the changes year over year in weights come into play, and why it's such an important talking point, because it gives you a window into what's happening in the NFL, what big time free agents have signed big extensions, what quarterbacks, have signed big extensions as well. And kind of going down that list, you're seeing how teams are valuing the top players and building their teams around them and their impact, right? At what point is the meteoric rise of quarterback contracts going to not end, because it's probably not ever going to reverse, but plateau? That's kind of what this exercise, gives you a little bit of window into, and spoiler alert, not anytime soon, not from what we can see. So that's sort of the long and short of it, right? As the NFL evolves, all 22 evolves with it, and the weights will always reflect the value of each position today in the NFL. So as you're building your team for today's NFL.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I guess let's start off with quarterback, right? So quarterback went from 10.68%, already the highest paid position in the NFL by a very, very comfortable margin, almost double any other position in the NFL. It's now at 10.9%. So getting a 0.22% increase, which is a lot in 1 year, especially for, again, the already highest weighted position in the NFL. It's a really interesting offseason, especially for that conversation, because yes, we saw like, Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts, all of those guys get paid last year. And then this year we're seeing Kirk Cousins and Jared Goff. And it's so interesting because the conversation is always the Kirk Cousins line, right? Is Kirk Cousins above the line or below the Kirk Cousins line of, can you actually win a championship with this player? And I think since 2016, it's fair to say that Cousins has been a better player than Goff has. Yes, he's a lot older at this point, but he's been a better quarterback, right? So both of those teams said, we are so confident that we can win a Super Bowl with Kirk Cousins and Jared Goff that we're going to give them money high enough that it's actually going to impact the positional weights in all 22, right? Like it actually has an impact. What other guys made an impact this year at quarterback?
Yeah, Goff was the big one. I think it's interesting because I would rather frame the argument a different way. Is that the quarterback position went up because of the Jared Goff extension in particular, right? So the top 5 salaries are what goes into the calculation. And so one thing to note too, if we take a little bit of a side tour here, is when we talk about a position goes up by like say 1% in the offseason as far as its weight goes, that's a big deal because of the scoring in the game where it's your PFF grade for the week times your positional weight. Everything adds up to 100%, right? So basically at the end of the week, at the end of the games of that week, your team has essentially like a team PFF score, right? You can't score above 100 because you're graded out of 100 times, something out of 100%. So you're never going to get over 100 points. And what we see is a lot of games are decided by 3 points or less most of the time. So if you have a 1% boost for a position or a player at a position that is worth 1% more than it was last year, and they score a 90, that's 0.9 points right there for that one player, for example, right? That's a big deal. That can sway the results of a week, especially if that is a position group where you have 2 guys on the field at once, like a receiver, for example. So 1% matters. Okay, it's a big deal. So sidetracking from that, right? Quarterbacks saw this big rise of almost 1.5% year over year increase in percentage or increase in weight because of the large contracts that were doled out. But that does not include guys like Dak Prescott, who we know is going to get a huge deal at some point because Stephen Jones is just in over his head with this stuff and they always get taken over the barrel in these contract negotiations. But guys like Dak Prescott, guys like Josh Allen for large extensions that are coming up, right? It's only going to go up. It's not even like those guys are included. Yeah, Mahomes he's
not even in top 5 anymore, right? Mahomes.
Right. And they're going to do his deal again because I feel like that's what they do every like 3 years. They kind of say, okay, we'll get you back up to market rate. They restructure things. But right, Mahomes is not even included. He's actually the 10th highest average salary per year quarterback in the NFL today. 10th. So that's obviously going to change with the restructure.
Jordan Love hasn't been paid, right?
He's Tua. If we just saw Kirk get paid and Goff, is Tua next? If Tua gets paid at a top 5 level, you talk about that Kirk Cousins line. We're paying guys below the Kirk Cousins line at the top 5 of that position.
Tua is probably the most interesting one that you're talking about here, right? Because
you love Tua. That's why.
No, it's like but Tua is much younger, has a lot of early success in his career, and they're basically saying like, I think they were hoping they would get away with maybe paying him $45 million a year. And then Jared Goff goes and gets what, 55?
Yeah, it's not going to, I think 53 and some change. I don't think 53? It was quite 55. Yeah.
So what the heck kind of deal is Tua going to get? And is that sustainable, right? For a team like the Dolphins, would you as a all 22 owner, are you going to say, I'd rather have a different quarterback, trade away this quarterback, get something for him, and let somebody else take that risk? I think it's going to be a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, because again, barely top 10 quarterbacks, if that, getting paid at a top 5 level just shows you that the momentum is not going to slow down at any time soon for these escalating contracts. And so that's only going to drive their positional weight and impact higher and higher when it comes to team building. And that's going to be reflected in the platform. So, yeah, they're almost twice as much as wide receivers now. Like, I think it's the next one on the list. And so maybe I'll pull up the chart just to see. I'd keep people waiting, right? Let's pull up the visual chart here. And so this is just
this visual chart doesn't tell you this is a change chart. This doesn't show you the.
Yeah.
All right. You could share this for now. Okay.
You could have stopped me 10 seconds ago. This is.
I didn't know if you had like a secret.
I'm impulsive. No secret. I don't keep secrets. I'm transparent. Trade negotiations, anything else. I'm 100% transparent. I don't do the buy low. I send you something low, then you go high.
All right.
I don't do the meet in the middle.
Put this away for a minute. We'll get.
All right. Fine. I got excited.
Yeah, you got way too excited.
So quarterbacks 10.9%.
Right. Quarterback's 10.9. Yeah. Number 2, you were saying is receiver. It's 6.06 now, over 6%. It was 5.89. That's a huge rise as well. And it's a rise before Justin Jefferson gets paid. He has not been paid yet. So again, another position where the momentum just keeps going and going and going. 2 years ago, it was 5.24%. It's almost over a percentage, a complete 1 point in the past 2 years, which is insane. It's absolutely insane. Who are the big influences this year?
So you had Amon-Ra St. Brown. Yeah, St. Brown, AJ, both of the Browns, AJ Brown, and then Amon-Ra St. Brown, top 2. Tyreek Hill's deal is still up there. He's third at 30 per year. Same with Devontae Adams and Cooper Kupp. So really it was those 2 guys, AJ and Amon-Ra St. Brown, who again just drove the value higher. They're now at 32 and just over 30 million per year on an annualized basis. So yeah, that's a big deal. So for some context there, Cooper Kupp is at 5 and he's at $26.7 million per year. So these guys were both outside of that range. So you essentially have a net boost of at least or almost $4 million from the bottom now being added to the top at over $30 million, $32 million for AJ Brown at the very top of the position there. So that's why, even though it's only 2 names that got new deals, it just kind of keeps escalating. It's however the maths that allows the rich to continue to get richer in this sense.
Right. And St. Brown being the only guy so far from that draft class to get his paycheck. But again, it's Justin Jefferson. Will T. Higgins get a big payday like that? Jamar Chase the year after, right? Like
CeeDee Lamb.
CeeDee Lamb hasn't been paid.
Yeah.
Oh, the Cowboys are going to be in such.
The Cowboys are going to be broke.
Oh man. Yeah. So like again, receiver position, one that's going to rise. Who is next on the list? I think it's edge rusher, right? Edge rusher at 5.77. Last year they were at 5.46. So another riser, but they actually had fallen the year previously from 6%. So kind of like more up and down for them, but it's obvious that it's an important position, right? This is usually during the NFL draft, the first defensive position that gets taken. And this year was no different with Latu.
Yeah.
Latu. Sorry. Can't say his name right now. Anyway. And it is just
right
again,
now, but go ahead.
It's not just, important in terms of what they get paid, but the teams just continue to invest resources in the position.
If you look at the free agents, you kind of previewed who's yet to get paid at receiver. When you preview the edge rushers for free agency in 2025, there's only like one name in the top 30, according to The Athletic. It's Hassan Reddick.
Oh, okay.
And he's going to be what? He's going to be 30 years old, or he's going to be 30 years old. So he's not in line necessarily for a big payday. So
Parsons is the year after, though.
Parsons is the year after, but again, it's one of those deals where does he get signed, over the next 12 months or so into next offseason, where they don't let it get to expiration before they sign him. So that's another one where it could. But when it comes to just projecting free agents, that list is kind of dull. So that could be another one where It's just more volume. We know that it's a premium position, and that's why it's kind of held steady in the top 3.
Mm-hmm.
But the volume of guys like we've seen at quarterback and receiver getting those big paydays hasn't been there, just mostly due to timing more so than anything else.
Well, I think we talked about it during the draft process too, how when you look at like the all 22 error, there hasn't been that many guys that you fall in love with that we would say are elite guys at edge, right? It was Micah Parsons, and then Aiden Hutchinson was like borderline-ish. There hasn't really been that many studs, right? After like the Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa, Watts, like all of those guys got paid. Myles Garrett, Chase Young was supposed to be that guy, right? And kind of flopped. So maybe it is there hasn't been as much influx of that elite talent that are going to get that top of the market pay. But saying that Micah Parsons should blow the roof off, and thinking about you guys paying Dak, Lamb, and Parsons, kind of, the Lions just kind of did that with Sewell, Goff, and St. Brown. But I think all of your guys make more than all of their guys.
Sure. I mean, we're going to overpay them. But yeah, I get what you're saying.
But I mean, I think Dak is better than Goff. I think Lamb is better than St. Brown. I think Parsons is probably comparable to Sewell, but at a more important position in terms of value to the NFL.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Mm-hmm. That's what the data is telling us, right? So
correct.
Given that, yeah. And that doesn't even get into his versatility with what else he can do and what he does do for that defense. And even if you're of the mindset that they should just keep it simple and just have him just terrorize the opposing offense moving forward wherever he lines up, he has that versatility, which only makes him even more valuable. So yeah, that's gonna be one that, similar to Aaron Donald with the defensive interior for such a long time, Parsons might be the one that kind of just really kind of drags along everybody else and keeps them at that high level.
Yeah, exactly. That was going to be the point I make, right? It's like Justin Jefferson probably will become the highest paid non-quarterback when he gets paid. Parsons doesn't technically have to get paid for a year later, right? But I think when Parsons gets paid, he becomes the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL, right? I think there's positional value and teams see that, but then also when there's a special player like Aaron Donald, teams will go up and beyond for that player, Parsons being that player. Although you guys are trying to do like smear campaigns and stuff to get his value down, which is hilarious.
That's what they do. That's what the Joneses do. That's what they do. And all they do is end up pissing off the agents. So yeah, fantastic.
Defensive interior was the position that when we did our inaugural draft, I thought this is going to be the position that rises maybe the most. And I'm not far off because quarterback obviously just takes the cake for sure. But defensive interior in the 3 years, right, went from 4.95 to 5.14 to 5.46. So in those 3 years has gone up considerably and is now threatening edge as the most valuable defensive position and really threatening everything basically but receiver and quarterback to be the most valuable position in the NFL. The defensive interior position, right? We talked about it with edge. Those elite guys now have all really been paid. It's Quinnen Williams, it's Dexter Lawrence, it's Chris Jones. Who else is on that list?
Wilkins, Matabike, Derek Brown. So the top 5, I feel like they've all gotten deals very recently. Chris Jones, Christian Wilkins, Justin Matabike, Derek Brown, and Quinnen Williams are the top 5. So wow. Yeah, so that those are all recent big extensions, which is why when you thought that there would be such a fall off because of Aaron Donald's retirement and how much he was making, they made up for it just in bulk by all 5 of them just getting paid and again, carrying the water for that position.
Right, because you win in the trenches, but it's also getting pressure on the quarterback in the trenches is so valuable, especially up the middle. That was Tom Brady's biggest weakness as a quarterback, right? When you can pressure him up the middle, the best quarterbacks struggle, right? You need to be able to sit there. So yeah, it's definitely valuable. I think another player that isn't in the top 5, but just goes to show the deal that Christian Barmore got is one of those deals that you're like, how much? It was almost like an NBA deal where it's like this middling player gets $90 million and you're scratching your head going, excuse me, what? So yeah, that's kind of, again, a sign of things to come for the defensive interior. I think if teams think they have a guy that can make a real impact, they're going to get a big payday.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think of that, but similar to what we were talking about as far as like, oh, look at the baseline, look at how low these quarterbacks go and still get paid big money. that's actually not a bad barometer for defensive interior. Look at how low you go and still get big money. So maybe Barmore is the line for defensive interior.
Could be. And it's not to say he's a bad football player, but he's
Right.
just never been that level of guy. And I think a lot of teams probably like teams that have a guy probably would look at that Barmore deal and go, wow, that's insane. Tackle is next up on the list. They are the next most valuable position, going from 4.77% to 5.02. So a nice little gain for them. The Sewell deal, I'm assuming, is the one that influenced this. I don't think there was any other big ones that I can remember.
Yep. Sewell's the big one, 28 million per year, followed by Tunsil, Thomas, Trent, and Jordan Mailata to round out the top 5. So yeah, Penei Sewell was the big one. So the 5th highest contract value annualized here is 22 million at Jordan Mailata. After that, it's Dion Dawkins at just over 20 million per year. Mm-hmm. So for Sewell to basically enter the top 5 with a 28 million per year annualized contract, that again, that raises the ceiling and also the floor there of the top 5 bracket that we look at. So that's really the big driver there. He set the market.
Right. And it's been, tackle is going to be an interesting one to follow over the next few years, because that influx of talent, that elite talent again I think has now all been paid. Maybe Christian Darrisaw. I don't remember if he's been paid.
Damn, he's still only 23 years old. That's crazy. I don't believe Darrisaw has signed a big deal yet. No. And again,
so he might be one, right?
Yeah. Darrisaw's not up here. So he's another one that's up there.
But I don't think there's many others.
No, you got Taylor Decker, who's projected to be a free agent. So we'll see how age might impact how much he gets paid, as opposed to maybe he does still get a top of the line deal, but maybe it's not as long as some others. So that's another one to look at there, right across from Sewell over there in Detroit is what happens there. Tristan Wirfs is another one. So we still have a couple in there that'll at least tread water.
Okay. Yeah, that's going to be a big one.
Yeah, so they're going to at least tread water probably heading into next year.
I think Wirfs becomes the highest paid tackle. I'd be surprised if he wasn't. Okay.
Agreed.
So that's tackle. After tackle is corner, with corner now at 4. Oh, no, I'm wrong. Guard surpassed corner. Wow. Okay, so this is the interesting stuff, right? This is why it's so fun to play all 22 and follow these trends, because
barely, but they did.
Corner has been seen as one of those more valuable positions in the NFL, but we're kind of seeing in NFL drafts, they go maybe a little later, and it's kind of because of that inconsistency that you get from the corner position year over year. The top maybe 1% of corners are going to be super consistent, but after that, there's not this depth of corners that just every year you can trust them to be elite players, right? You hear Jalen Ramsey, you hear Sauce Gardner, Surtain maybe, but after that, there really is this just inconsistency that happens at the corner position. So they actually fall behind guard, and guard is a position as well that we've been kind of screaming for, that they should be getting paid more, because it is so rare to get the good ones that when you get the good ones, you need to keep them and you need to pay them. I'm assuming this is all because of the Panthers.
Yeah, it's the Panthers. You got, well, it's two things as a matter of fact. And it's one of those deals where, again, it's hard to keep track and you don't know but based off of the position in the platform, Michael Onwenu actually comes in at number 5.
Wow.
And he's a guard. So he plays right tackle and has played guard for New England as well. So we'll see where he ultimately ends up. But for the purposes of the calculations here in positional weights, his contract is weighted as a guard in the platform. So he gives you a little bit of a boost at the bottom there at the 5th spot. And then, you got Robert Hunt with his 20 million a year. Landon Dickerson as well at 21 per year actually tops the list. So you have the Eagles in there as well, kind of doing their part to buoy the guard position. So they paid a guard, but then talking about the juxtaposition between guard and corner, they went ahead and drafted 2 corners, right? So they needed security at both. They drafted their corners, signed their guards to a big deal. If one team in the NFL had done the inverse, corner would have still been ahead of guard in the weights, just kind of how it shakes out. But yeah, the reason it's that close is because the variability of cornerback play. The very best ones limit that variability year over year, but it's still just a high variance position because it's so hard to just be at the top of your game at that position week in and week out. That does kind of bring things down just a bit when it comes to who gets treated or paid at the top of the line for that position. So I think that's what we're seeing here. But yeah, I don't think the depth or the quality of depth at the guard position in the NFL today is enough to hold this. I think once you start seeing guys like Surtain, because we talk about the 2021 draft class, they're going to get paid soon. When Surtain comes along, I think he puts cornerback on top there, and I think that's probably where they're going to stay for a while thereafter. But for right now, and we've seen it, guard is important, and it's a scarce position, so the best ones got paid.
Yeah, and you're seeing, right, like the inverse on defense, right, where defensive interior is also getting paid. Those positions battle, right? Those are the positions that battle. You have to, as the position defensive interior gets better, you need to find guys at the guard position that can hold their own. But I agree with you. I think the guard position, there hasn't necessarily been elite talent in drafts where you're saying that's an elite guy, I'm all for paying him that kind of money. I think those guys now have been paid this year. You just went through the list. All of those guys are basically new names on that guard top paid list. But until this draft, there really hasn't been a draft where I'm saying those are elite guard kind of players. The cornerback position, right, to your point as well. Surtain,
I tried to tell you about Tyler Smith. I'll just say that, but yeah, go ahead.
Tyler Smith. You kidding me?
And Trey Smith. I tried to tell everybody about Trey Smith.
You're really going to tell me about Tyler Smith when you guys took him one pick above us, I think? Or we passed on him and you got him one pick after us or something, and that's the guy I wanted. You're going to tell me? Okay.
We had a sleeper post. If people go back into the deep archives of all 22 back in, 2022? We had him as our sleeper pick like over a month out before the draft. Like, hey, keep an eye out for this guy getting picked early. Just saying.
Yeah, put a little feather in your cap.
There
but yeah,
that's
cornerback position's going
to ignore the other stuff I get wrong. But yeah.
Surtain, Sauce, when those guys get paid, I agree with you. I think the position will go back up. I think Sauce could be a guy like Parsons where there's a chance the Jets threaten the highest paid non-quarterback, giving that to a guy like Sauce because of how talented he is above the rest of the cornerback position. So I think there's a chance that you're right. Maybe it will go back up. But those are the next two.
Little all 22. So who would you take if they're both available and you're on the clock? Say it's round 3 of your all 22 startup. You taking Sauce or you taking Surtain?
Sauce.
Really?
I don't know. I don't think it's much of a hard decision.
Okay, I'll take Surtain.
Are you?
We can talk about it another time. I love Surtain. Do you not love Surtain?
I do, but more than Sauce.
I love Sauce, but more than Surtain? No.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, we'll have a whole conversation about it. Okay.
Sure.
All right. Well, the next positions, right? I'm just going through it. Those are the safety. I think we're down to safety, and safety's been kind of Mr. Consistent. They did go up 0.02%, so like basically nothing. But it's Xavier McKinney to the Packers, probably.
It's McKinney and it's Winfield. He snuck in there before the deadline,
right?
To basically again hold steady, and because again, right, it's all a balancing act. If and we're gonna get to it, but as receiver and quarterback go up big time, someone is losing value on the back end, right? There's a little bit of a push pull. So Winfield signing his big deal in particular, right? That just keeps safety where they were. He keeps them from losing value at the expense, or keeps safety's value being from the expense of the rise in quarterback and receiver, for example. So that even though they barely moved, there is a big deal to talk about, which is it's Antoine Winfield, like you said. So yeah, Winfield and McKinney are the two there that just did just enough to keep them essentially where they're at.
Right. And that's a good point, right? And I know you're all smart people out there, but for those of you that it might have got a little confusing, right? Since we're talking about percentage increases, doesn't matter if the safety position's highest paid player was 50 million. It's obviously not, but 50 million. And then the next guy gets 55. If every other position got $10 million more, right? So even if it goes up in salary, it's going to fall in terms of percentage because it doesn't keep up with how other positions are getting paid. But yes, Winfield very much deserves that money. He is one of my favorite players just because he's super scrappy and doesn't really get talked about a lot at all, right? He's kind of like that unsung hero on that team, just really becoming just a great player over the course of his career and not really a top rated prospect at the time, unless you were, again, me talking about him 4 or 5 years ago.
There you go. Hype yourself up. There you go.
I'll put a feather in the cap on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. He wasn't the prototype, so he was overlooked, right? And everyone was like, oh, well, yeah, I get it. His name is Antoine Winfield Jr. We all remember Antoine Winfield Sr. So yeah, that's great and all, but he's got short arms, yada, yada, not running the fastest. And now look, so still just a fantastic player, and he's kept that up in the NFL. We'll see how pending free agents like Justin Reed in particular impact this moving forward next year. If you try to map out the trajectory of safety, I think he's really the only one. Budda Baker, I think, is in line for another deal too after the year, but I'm not sure that's going to be enough of a bank breaker. Maybe he breaks the top 5. I don't see him at the top of the position. So it's probably up to Justin Reed to once again be that guy that kind of keeps safety steady and prevents them from losing value, because I think, as we all see, most of the big deals taking place are not at the safety position. And when you're in the game, when you're playing all 22, when you're building your team, that's something you take notice of. It's like damn, these safeties are kind of hard to find. The good ones are hard to find. So yeah, I'm not sure there's many big deals down the pike. We'll see how maybe Justin Reed fits into all of that.
Sure. And I think we have to wait a few years to get the next guys. I think Kyle Hamilton will be one of those guys that might be an outlier salary, right? I think he might be the highest paid safety by considerable margin when it is his time to get paid. And then even maybe like a Jaquan Brisker might be a guy that becomes like a highest paid at the position for a short time before Hamilton gets paid, right? Those two, in my mind, are probably the next guys up. The next highest paid position is tight end. We're now getting to the bottom 3, besides kickers and punters. But the bottom 3, tight end is number 3, going from, it actually went up, right? So 3.01 to 3.31, which is actually like a decent chunk higher. And that's TJ Hawkinson, Travis Kelce. Is that it?
I think Goddard got a deal this offseason, right? He came in, he rounds out the top 5. I want to say his deal was this year, but again, babies, little sleep, but pretty sure that's the case here. But yeah, so again, not a premium position. One of those that, okay, you get a superstar, they get paid, that kind of maybe moves them up or down a little bit here or there, but this is a clear tier down from some of the earlier positions we were talking about. Mm-hmm. So not that they're not worthy of time to be spent discussing them, but it's kind of another one of those deals, right? Just because we're all 22 doesn't mean that we don't have a lot of similarities to traditional fantasy. And it's one of those deals in fantasy where it's like, after the top, 4, it's just like a giant soup of tight ends, and nobody really is worth taking early and really spending big on or investing heavily into. That's pretty much it in the NFL too. Whether, despite, adding in blocking and everything else into the equation, that's still the case here. You have the elite, maybe 1 or 2 like tier 2 below that, and then just a bunch of just guys that you really could just kind of interchange here and there and be fine with. And that's just kind of what we see here. You might get one big deal here or there in a given year, but there ain't much out there.
See, I liked the tight end position last year. I think we saw more of the youth at the tight end position start to establish themselves as legitimate football players. Tight end is basically like a crapshoot until the guy's 25 years old. You have no idea what you have until they really have 3 or 4 years in the NFL. And then you start to see some payoff. And I think last year we started to see that. I think there are 2 guys that I actually love for all 22 this year that haven't really gotten that much hype. And it's Jake Ferguson on the Cowboys. I think he's really going to be more of the, he'll work in all 22. He'll work in traditional fantasy, where I think he's going to break out as a receiver. He's kind of a well-rounded player. He looked great at times last year. And now that they didn't sign a big or draft a number 2 receiver, he might get a lot of looks. So I really like that. And then the other guy that I actually haven't heard anything about, and I've been super high on since his rookie season, is Will Disley. Got signed very quietly by the Rams. And you talk about Go look at his all 22 success, Ray, and then give me the oh my god. He's been awesome in all 22. Awesome. When he plays football, when he is healthy enough to play football, the dude is an absolute stud as a blocker. He goes to the Rams where they're going to run the football so darn much that this guy might actually be on the field quite a bit.
Chargers, you're getting your LA teams mixed up, but yes.
Oh, shoot. Sorry, everyone. Sorry, everyone out there.
We know what you meant. We know what you meant. This is the one time someone doesn't say San Diego with the Chargers. You say LA and then it shifts you up. But yes.
It does. But anyway, I think he's going to be a guy that you could probably just go grab from free agency, plug in, and he'll be a starter for you when he's not injured every single week that he plays. Remember I said that, Ray.
Okay. Yeah, sure. You take that. You have your high scoring 2% or whatever it is in your weekly matchup, and
3.31% now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cool. And I have Micah Parsons, so there's that. So we'll see how that works out for you. What's next? What's the next position? Are we at the very bottom three?
No, 2. We're at the second to the bottom is running back, who for the third year in a row has gone down from 2.94% to 2.87%. And, it was probably the best free agent running back class in a long time, where every single name at the time, there was 8 guys that you could get to be franchise running backs. Nobody really got paid. And it's, again, just devaluing of the position. People don't want to pay a running back a second contract because of injuries, the short term of their careers, essentially. So, I don't know who's at the top of the list anymore, but it's kind of a sad little world for running backs right now.
Yeah, this is sad because so you have Barkley and Jacobs at 4 and 5. They got deals this offseason. Top 3 is McCaffrey, Kamara, and Jonathan Taylor. So again, like you said, we looked at this offseason for running backs to say, okay, this is it. This is their shot to get paid, make a statement about their worth. And yeah, a couple of them got paid, right? I think I'm just glad Saquon is finally in a situation that isn't historically horrendous. But yeah, we saw their best shot and it didn't move the needle. They got paid more, okay, good. But compared to everyone else, they didn't make up any ground whatsoever. And if this free agency class wasn't going to be the one to do it, I don't see what bucks the trend of running back being continually devalued when it comes time to pay these guys. And so therefore their weight, their value is going to continue to just go down. I don't see what reverses that. And this running back draft class is not going to be the one to do it either. Sorry. This is not the one. Next year actually looks pretty darn good, but then what are you going to wait another 4 years for those guys to get their due? If teams feel like paying them when they're 26 at that point, I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel for running backs. Maybe you do, but I don't.
Yeah. Well, I think it's going to be super interesting because we haven't had a year yet in the all 22 era where we've seen a CBA deal get done. So what happens when they change the structure, if the players are successful at all at changing the structure of how they get paid, right? How that'll affect our equation and our weights, right? That'll be interesting. But I think that's really the only hope running backs have, is to go into that negotiation with some ideas and come out with some changes for the way things are done, which might mean that there's an opt-out in rookie deals where they can say, if I've had, a successful 2 years, I'm going to opt out of the contract and somebody has to pay me after 2 years instead of after 4 or 5 years, right? I think that's a big part of the issue for running backs. But it's funny too, because I think we're all kind of in the running back world right now, like personally, right? Like if you're at work and inflation is at 9% and they come to you with a 3% raise, like acting like they're doing you a service, we're all there, right? It's like, that's how running backs feel. They're dealing with inflation and they're getting 3% raises. And
you have like that one Saquon Barkley in your office and you're like, yeah, man, go get yours, and then he gets his and it's not even really that great.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're all
like, oh, there's no hope for us. Yeah.
That's how we all feel right now.
Let's please move on. I don't want to.
Okay. The last position, final position is center. Obviously, again, besides kickers and punters, but center falls from 2.82% to 2.73%. This is a Jason Kelsey retires, so his salary gets taken off the board. I think we had a lot of hopes for some of the centers that had gotten drafted 4 or 5 years ago that haven't necessarily panned out. I think like Josh Myers on the Packers might be in year 3 or 4. Like you were excited at the time that they drafted him, but it just hasn't really panned out. And Creed Humphrey is still well into his rookie contract, where it's probably still going to be a couple years, maybe 1 or 2 years before he gets paid to help raise that ceiling. So it is looking pretty bleak for the center position as well. I also think it's a position where there's only, right, it's kind of like quarterback. Like there's only 32 starters at the center position, and like really only 10 of them are
good,
viable. Like,
yeah,
so
if that.
tough. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's going to be on Creed Humphrey to really carry the torch here for a bit with his next contract. I think that's the big one. And not to add to the little body blows here that center's taken, but apparently Jackson Powers Johnson is going to be a guard in Vegas.
Oh,
so
I didn't know
even
that.
I mean, if that holds 3 years from now, 4 years from now, whatever it is, if he pans out like we think he can, at least on the field,
Mm-hmm.
that maybe guard is the one that reaps the benefit from that instead of center. But this was a good center class.
It was. Zach Frazier to the Steelers is going to be a good one, right? So
yep, I assume Graham Barton is maybe center as well. So yeah, it helps on the way, but it's a bit further out,
Right. All right. So
like the enemies at your gates and the reinforcements are still like days away. You got to just hold serve as long as you can.
Right. Let's pull up the graphic you made, because I do think it's awesome, and now's a good time to talk about it. Right. So we're talking about how things change, and we wanted to first give you an idea of what the weights are for this year. But now you have to talk about, because a big part of all 22, again, is not just drafting the best players, but ensuring that you're drafting the best players at the best, most valuable positions. But that changes year over year, right? Those positions change. So this chart literally will show you how that change has happened over the last 3 years. And we talked about receiver, how they've gotten absolutely paid. They've actually outperformed quarterback in terms of growing their positional weight. But it might be surprising to you, right? It seems like quarterback and receiver and even defensive interior have just eaten while everybody else, guard as well, right? Eating, but everybody else kind of just taking the blow for those other positions. Does this represent trends that you think will continue to happen? Or do you think this is just, that's where the talent was right now, but that'll change?
That's not going to change for quarterback and receiver. It's almost like a microcosm of everything else, where it's like the rich are just getting richer. Mm-hmm. Whether you're talking about the NFL, college football, life, whatever, it's just, I think that's just one of those deals where there's, especially in quarterback and receiver in particular, if you want to take a look at this, just focus on them for a minute. It's a passing league. And with the way that the game is played, the amount of, it's been said before, 7-on-7s and such, the development at those positions, quarterback is always going to get paid regardless, because it's a scarcity and importance issue, right? As important as it is, and as great as many quarterbacks are, there are really only about 10-ish ones that can win a championship in a given year. And everybody's desperate for those guys. And in their desperation, they're either going to pay guys that fall a bit below that line, or do what they can to get one that is, and basically invest whatever is needed to get them. Because if you don't have one of them, it's essentially a non-starter for a championship. So because of that, quarterback is, at least for the very foreseeable future, likely always going to be in the green. Wide receiver, we just see more and more talent coming into the league. I mean, look at this receiver class, how deep it was this past draft class. And then we talked about the names that are going to get signed over the next year or so with Jefferson, Lamb, and Higgins, and all these other names. That's not slowing down anytime soon. And I think with this being a passing league, that's just kind of what we're seeing. That's reflected in the increases that have happened. And I think that's where the focus on value is still going to be moving forward as far as investing in these positions. I don't see that changing anytime soon. When it comes to guys like guard and defensive interior, I think defensive interior, again, we had like 5 big contracts so far take place just this year. So I think that you're not going to see that again. So I think it's going to go down. It's still going to be a top 5, 6-ish group overall, but it's not going to have the same level of increase or trend that we've seen thus far. But when it comes to, again, the passing premium in this league, quarterback and receiver not going anywhere anytime soon. Or they're going somewhere. It's just they're going up and up and up and up.
Yeah, I think quarterback, receiver definitely going up. I think you're right. Guard and defensive interior, I think there have been some really good players that have gotten paid, but I don't think that's necessarily going to continue as strongly as it has. I think edge being a negative will change. I think, again, when Parsons gets paid, maybe Aiden Hutchinson gets paid, I think that will kind of go back up. Same with corner, Sauce, Surtain. Maybe even JC Horn turns things around. There are going to be guys that get paid at corner to turn that around. And you talked about it. It's a pass happy league, edge, corner, impact pass, almost as much as a receiver does, right? So those positions will get paid. I think tight end, again, I'm going to reiterate, I think there's a really good group of young guys that are starting to prove themselves. I would be surprised if tight end continue to go down. I'm not saying it's going to skyrocket. I'm an optimist. I don't think it's going to, skyrocket, but I think it'll go back to maybe around 0 where it just maintains. Linebacker, obviously.
Before we talk about linebacker, because I just saw something while you were talking on the pod here. Okay. Going back to 2022, right? That's what this chart's looking at. Let's just go back to 2022.
Mm-hmm.
The top 5, the average annual salary of the top 5 highest paid receivers in 2022 was $21.7 million. Okay, that's 2022.
21, you said 21.7?
21.7.
Okay.
In 2022. This year, 2024, it's 29.3. That's over $8 million or almost $8 million increase
per year.
In what, 24 months?
Mm-hmm.
$8 million per year increase. That's over that's almost 40% of its original value. That's insane. And like we said, the biggest names are coming up. That's not stopping. I'm sorry. I just had to. That's a lot.
That's crazy. Yeah. You look at Chase, Justin Jefferson, and CeeDee Lamb all have a very good argument to be the top paid receiver. I don't think I would be very surprised if one of them hit 33, 34 million a year. If one of them gets 35, maybe that's a little bit insane, but like 30 million, 32 million is very well in reach for a receiver in the next year.
Yeah, exactly. Crazy. In 12 months, someone will be there.
Mm-hmm.
At least it's also one person.
It's also interesting because when we did our first draft in all 22, I actually avoided the receiver position, not because it's not valuable, but because it's so deep, right? And there are always every single year guys that come in that can impact your receiver room. And I hit on Justin Jefferson. I have Romeo Doubs. I have, I think I have Josh Downs, maybe Tank Dell, like guys like that. Like I have guys that have made a positive impact, but you get a Marvin Harrison this year. You get a guy like that can just change things for you. And Malik Neighbors, that's second to none to quarterback, right? Like quarterback's one. If you can't get one of the top quarterbacks that are going to impact you. And we talk about that all the time, right? Like where Caleb Williams is a pretty sure thing. None of the other guys are a sure thing. Would you rather have, the 10.6% weight or 10.9% weight at quarterback with a guy like Bo Nix or the 6 point, whatever percent at receiver with Marvin Harrison? I think people are going to really have a hard time making that decision this year. That's going to be really tough.
Yeah, that is. Sorry, side note, but that was big. Mm-hmm. Now the other just blinking light here in the room. Go ahead, take it away.
Linebacker's in red. It's the only one in red because it is over 1% decrease. It's almost at 1.5% decrease. This has been a conversation that we've had over and over again. Bobby is notorious for having it where linebacker is just so hard to get right for NFL teams. I did like an equation a few years ago where I took a poll of all of the linebackers chosen in the first round. And I said, have they gotten a second contract? Have they been successful? None of them have been successful. Almost none. I think there's like literally one guy that's been successful as a first round pick at linebacker. It's so hard to get right because these teams keep targeting these uber athletic linebackers that they ask to do so much. And it's not easy for a linebacker to step into the league. And Isaiah Simmons is a perfect example. Be a coverage linebacker, be a blitzing linebacker, and also a run stuffer, right? Like that is insanely hard to do. It's a crazy skill set, right? That's why, like, I think tight ends are getting a little bit better because maybe teams are spreading things out a little bit more for them that make their lives easier. That just makes linebackers' lives harder, right? That doesn't make it easier. What we've seen is the linebackers like the Leo Chanels, the Jack Campbells, guys that are 250 pounds plus, bigger bodied linebackers, where the teams maybe don't ask them to do all of those things. And they say, be the run stuffing linebacker, drop into curl coverage every now and then, but that's it. Those guys are doing well in the NFL because, again, it's just what they're asked to do is much simpler. I think this is going to continue to happen until teams start to recognize that, kind of like running back, right? Like, you're better off with a committee. You can't have one guy doing all of the things well. They won't. So you need linebacker by committee, which is hard because it's, on offense, you can do that when you control what plays being called. But on defense, you have no idea what's going to be called, right? So switching out the linebacker for situations is difficult. It's really hard to predict that. So I don't see a linebacker picking back up. I think it honestly continues to fall.
Yeah, I mean, and then you have a guy like, unfortunately, Dre Greenlaw. I think this is the last year of his contract, and he had the Achilles tear in the Super Bowl. That was someone who maybe could have gotten a big payday. You just don't see that happening anymore. But so that's unfortunate. And then it's just, the position is under attack. The way offenses are designed, it is very hard to be successful at linebacker. And teams are just saying, hey, it's, off-ball run stuffer. We'll find somebody for that, but we're not going to pay them big money. We're not going to pay them premium position. We're premium penny here, right? We're going to focus that investment on the defensive interior, on the edge, and go from there. We're going to build our defense from the inside out, starting with that front and not necessarily the second level that gets put into so much conflict that no matter how good you are, half the time you just can't win based on the play run by the offense. So, yeah. It is the defensive version of running back in more ways than one, unfortunately. And it's just one of those deals where, somebody's gotta decrease in order for these quarterbacks and receivers to keep getting paid more. And that's linebacker, right? Teams are focusing their attention on quarterbacks and receivers and away from linebackers and running backs. That's just the long and short of it. That's what this chart is telling you. If you just had to answer a quick, easy question, hey Siri, who are the NFL teams investing? Who are the NFL teams focusing their investment on in 2024? You pull up this chart. Well, they're focusing their investments on quarterbacks, receivers, defensive tackles, and the interior of their offensive line. That's essentially it. That's the focus for 2024. And what are they not focusing on? Linebackers and running backs.
Right. I am surprised that safety.
She actually answered me.
I knew she would. I was like, that was a really dumb thing to do.
I have the iPad next to me, right, with a chart here, and I was like, I stopped that. Didn't know the phone was behind it. So, rookie mistake.
I am surprised that safety is held true, right? Like, safety is Mr. Consistent here, basically at 0%. I think it's at 0.1. Again, we haven't really seen an influx of safety talent or safeties getting these huge paydays, but they've held their course. So I guess, props to them. I don't necessarily see that continuing. I think that it probably goes down up until, again, Kyle Hamilton gets paid. I think that'll help it get back up, but I do think it goes down. Kickers and punters, don't know if you want to talk about that, but very minimal changes.
Yeah. So this is the key to winning, Kickers and punters are there. It's just a matter of did someone pay anybody this offseason or not? Is Justin Tucker getting paid, or did, I don't know, someone finds a new Austrian kicker from the XFL or something who's just like an absolute stud? I think one other interesting thing to note here, it's not a position per se, right? But I think what you see here with the big decline in pay for the wide receiver threes, the second running backs, and the second tight ends is that teams are also focusing more on their star players, their top players, right? Instead of going ahead and divvying up $35 million between a 7 out of 10 receiver to be your receiver 1 and then another 6 out of 10 receiver to be your receiver 3 or something like that, right? They're going all in for the difference maker and focusing their investments there. And therefore the third receivers, the second tight ends, the spell running backs, both running backs or, all running backs, but in general, those players that also play a pivotal role, those are the guys that are getting replaced in the draft. You're not seeing long-term deals for third wide receivers or second tight ends usually, right? So the value or the investment in those positions monetarily is going down, and they're being filled through the draft. And you're seeing, again, more of the money move to the star players at those positions. That's why you see the wide receiver weight increase so much, but yet the quote unquote offensive flex position, the wide receiver 3, tight end 2, second running back, go down. It's because the money's not just moving to any and all wide receivers. It's moving to the best wide receivers. And so I think that's just something to take note of too, is that the difference makers are going to continue to make more of a difference as more investment is placed onto them and less on the supporting cast, if you will.
Cool. Yeah, I think the only other thing I wanted to point out, and it's not necessarily related to this chart, so if you want to stop sharing, you can.
I feel like you hate this chart for some reason.
I
don't know why.
love this chart, and I think we should share it all over the place. I think this chart is incredible. Only thing is you forgot to put the All 22 logo back.
Yeah, where'd the ball go? I noticed that. I was like, the ball was there before, and it was in the file. Whatever.
It's fine.
Go ahead.
If you were to do a different chart, right, and it was just a bar chart of the positional weights for this year, right? This year alone by position. What you would see is offense has the really, really high paid positions and the really, really low paid positions. Defense is basically all of the positions in the middle. Like it is a really interesting thing to see how I think there are some really good examples of this in the NFL, the Chiefs being maybe the best one, right? Where you say, I'm going to pay my quarterback and maybe a tackle, maybe, in the past they had Tyreek Hill. They would pay their number one receiver. In their case, it's Travis Kelce now. But you pay the number one receiving option, you pay the quarterback, and then you make sure that your defense is full of really good players. And they kind of have done that, right? All of their first-round picks up until this year.
Up
right,
until Worthy, yeah.
Yeah, up
I
until
don't know why
Worthy.
the NFL let them have that, but yeah, go ahead.
Has been on defensive players, right? The Packers with Aaron Rodgers, they did the same thing, right? It was Devontae Adams. They had Aaron Rodgers. They had Bakhtiari. Then every first-round pick for the last 10 years was on defense, right? And they were paying defense. It's kind of the same thing we're seeing across the NFL as most teams are doing similar things. I think the Bills are another example of that right now, right? They have Josh Allen. They had Diggs. Now they don't, but they had Diggs. They don't really have a number one receiving option now. But it's Josh Allen, nothing else on offense, and then they're just pay defense, draft defense, pay defense, draft defense, pay defense. When teams feel that they have the quarterback, it seems like that's the route they take, which is super, super interesting to me. And I wonder if that trend continues as well, right? Where defense always is paid because you need defensive players to stop the best quarterbacks in the NFL. But it's defense getting paid, it's quarterbacks getting paid, it's receivers. But those positions on offense, like we said, we expect guards to kind of go back down. Centers are going to stay down. Running backs are going to stay down. You think tight ends are going to stay down. Like, is that going to be the trend in the NFL? It's just defense is going to be consistently well paid. The best players on offense are going to be paid, and then the rest won't.
So you're saying smart organizations don't make it a point to be sure to sign Ezekiel Elliott at the running back position to help their quarterback win games.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. I'm definitely saying that. I also am saying, like, I think my strategy, and I've talked about this on the pod plenty of times, right? When I have my young quarterback that I haven't paid, you need an amazing offensive line. You need receiving weapons. So spend money on your offense. And you could do that because, right? So if quarterback is the 10% of all of your pay, but you have a rookie one, it's not, right? So you can take that 9% of your pay that you saved by having a rookie quarterback and give it to the offensive line, give it to receivers to give them help. But once your quarterback is established, I understand what teams are doing, being like, you need to trust that my quarterback can make everybody else good on offense, but the defense you can't, right? The quarterback doesn't impact your defense. So go spend money on defense. If I had to project into the future, I think that's a trend that continues.
Yeah. It's kind of like raising a child, right? You nurture it, it's growing, you support it while it's young in its early days. And then when it's ready, it's like, all right, it's your world now. Like, go out and do something with everything we've invested into you. Like, now it's your time, and we're going to focus out. Like, yeah, That's pretty much what it is. Those developmental years for a quarterback are so important. But then once they are a veteran and they reach that status and a certain level of play and achievement, then you focus on the rest of the roster. That doesn't necessarily impact the quarterback's individual performance. So, yeah, good point. I like that.
Yeah. That's it, though. Is there anything else?
No, I think my child analogy and all my less than 2 years of experience in this, I think it's a perfect way to end the pod here. I think that's perfect.
Cool. Well, everyone, thank you for tuning in. If you haven't yet, please give us a follow on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook at all22_PFF, and give us a review wherever you watch or listen to your podcast, and have a great day.